Hello everybody, it's Foxy speaking, and welcome to another episode of Foxy's Fun Inspirational Chats. And today I will be your host. And in this episode, this is about an engineer who'd specialised in designing many things. Although, well, really he was an engineer, but eventually became an engineer designing aeroplanes, small biplanes, or designing aeroplanes, general flight use aeroplanes. This man with the engineering profession, his name was Henry Venroth. Henry Venroth loved more than anything than designing aeroplanes. Having led a squadron in during World War II, flying in a biplane or flying in an aeroplane, he always loved nothing more than biplanes, even though not designing biplanes for his current job. He would have to design he just had to design whatever planes he was asked to design before it could be manufactured in various factories. Although he did purchase a biplane for himself as a result of his good hard work and his successful job. One day, as it was his day off work, although despite being an older man now, he still had a few more years yet before his retirement. It was the year of 1964, and Henry Venroth, now at 59 years of age, decided he would go for a fly in his biplane. His wife obviously advised caution on him flying around in his biplane. But although despite advising her husband on caution, Henry would always assure his dear wife that he would always be safe. His dear wife, Brianne, did sometimes worry about her dear old husband Henry flying in a biplane, but having been married for well over 30 years, she was certain that he knew what he was doing, especially as he'd flown an aeroplane before. "Oh, well, my dear Brianne, I think it's time to go for a little fly in our precious little flying basket." Henry enjoyed affectionately naming his flying biplane the Flying Basket. "Okay, okay, my dear," Brianne said. "Just be careful and make sure you make it back in one piece. Don't worry, my dear," Henry said, as a matter of reassurance. "I shall be..." The reality is, I fly back always, and the aeroplane is generally fine. And so Henry put on his leather flight jacket, as it would be quite cold up in the sky, and put on his helmet, but the goggles were not pulled down yet. He turned the aeroplane's engine on. The engine started, and the front propeller began to spun faster and faster until spinning at full speed. The aeroplane's engine began to rattle as it roared into action. He pulled the lever as it began to move. It slowly moved in the garden, and he slowly moved the aeroplane until it got further to the flat part of their large massive garden, or their very own airfield garden, since it was very big, the aeroplane went faster and faster as it took off. Luckily it took off in just enough time as for it to not near the other roofs of other houses. And once the biplane took off, Henry pulled his goggles front to his eyes, as a means so that his eyes wouldn't go wrong when flying up in the sky or even into the clouds. The sky was peaceful, was a peaceful cavern. The sky was a peaceful blue forest, as Henry just soothed and enjoyed nothing more than the peace and tranquility up in the bright blue sky, with a few clouds idly passing by as he'd flown dutifully and happily in his biplane. Oh, a nice, happy day for flying, for having a little spin in the flying basket, Henry said, sighed happily. Henry Venroth absolutely loved nothing more than flying in his biplane. As he was flying, he was just relaxing as he took control, flying in the cockpit, appreciating the peace and tranquility and the excitement there could really be flying a plane on his own terms, just for the fun of it. He was not a fan of wing walking, but sometimes he permitted his young grandson, to do wing walking on his biplane. But obviously he would have to convince his grandson's mother first. Sometimes, as Henry Venroth was flying the plane, sometimes some birds would fly beside him. Sometimes he'd stick a thumbs up to the birds, and the birds would just look at him and just continue flying. And sometimes the birds would follow the biplane whenever he was flying in the sky. This time there was a bird. A group of pigeons flew from one side of the biplane, and another group of pigeons on the other side of the biplane was flying where the biplane was flying, and Henry Venroth and that was something that always gave a delight for Henry Venroth himself. I think the birds want a little race, Henry said. But he knew he wouldn't want to race the birds, and he knew he would not do anything to the birds if they flew beside him. He knew it was just the birds' nature. But eventually the birds just turned away and flew down to wherever they wanted to fly to next, as Henry continued flying. Eventually, after about 2 good hours of giving his plane a good fly in the flying basket biplane, Henry turned back and eventually landed in his home garden and got out of his biplane. Once he got his biplane into his shed, he began to refuel it. And once the biplane was refueled, he shut his biplane shed and went back home for tea. "Oh, you've made it in one piece, Henry, my dear," Brianne said. "Don't worry, my dear Brianne," Henry said. "You know, I always fly the flying basket back in one piece, always safe and sound, sometimes with a few birds that come to play, but nonetheless, I and the biplane and our flying basket shall be here to stay." And he gave his wife a nice affectionate kiss as a means of reassurance that no matter what he does, every time he's flying his biplane, the flying basket, he always knows he makes it back in one piece, but obviously he wouldn't fly it when he has a busy work week. Even when I retire, my dear love, he said as he sat relaxing on his armchair with a nice cup of tea. You know, my dear, when we retire, we should organise an aeroplane rally, where people far and wide from their own acquired ownerships of old-fashioned planes can bring them to the event and fly, and people could fly in them for fun. Complicated idea, Henry, my dear, Brianne said. But maybe one day in the future, if it's in our later lifetime, this could happen. Both Henry and Brianne, his wife, hoped that one day this would happen, seeing as Henry was extremely fond of old-fashioned planes. But Henry and Brianne, although despite his wife Brianne's worry of him flying from time to time, Henry and Brianne Venroth couldn't be a happier couple, in spite of Henry Venroth's highly revered interest in aeroplanes. Old-fashioned aeroplanes, that is. The end. Well, thanks everybody for watching this latest episode of Foxy's Fun Inspirational Chats. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Thanks all for watching, and ta-ta another time from Foxy.